everybody, this is Eric at Learn Design with Eric, and this week we're going to take another tour on the Photoshop, Illustrator, and the PC or Mac if you have a Mac. And we're just going to talk briefly about scaling images. So if you're scaling an image or if you're resizing an image, what the difference, what those two things mean, and what they mean to you if you're a photographer or somebody that's trying to learn how to use imagery in Photoshop. And then also talking about scaling vectors. What's the difference? How is scaling a vector different than scaling an image in Photoshop, which is a raster image? I talked about it briefly last week when I scaled this blue background image in from Unsplash, and when I first pasted it, it was itty bitty. I mean, it was like this big or something. And then I scaled it up and I said, I'm gonna do something that I should never do. And essentially what I was talking about was I was resizing the background image by a factor of probably like 6 or 8 or something like that. And you should definitely not do that. And the reason why I'm going to talk to you about briefly here. So first of all, let's talk about resizing and how things work in Photoshop and such. I'm going to open up this image of a photo shoot that we did of our family when my son was like 1 year old. Super cute, barely walking, kind of like dragging himself along the fence. And so here is the image, and this is shot in 2004 by Berg Photography. Beautiful image. And one of the things that you'll maybe note is in 2004, this was a super high-end camera, okay? So if we look at this in inches, this is a top-of-the-line digital camera from 2004. It's 2048 by 3072, or 6.827 inches by 10 inches. So it's about 7 by about 10 inches at 300 DPI. 300 DPI, for those of you that don't know, is the official kind of term that most people choose for printing. However, if we needed to make this bigger and we didn't want to lose any quality, we could then take the resolution down. So let's keeping everything the same, and we can take the resolution down, say to 200. So like if we wanted to print it on a large format piece where you're going to be standing back a ways, you don't need to have as much resolution, but you're not going to actually lose any quality because no pixels are changing hands, so to speak. They're not moving around. The resolution or the density of those pixels is changing, and that's all. So we could similarly make it even bigger. So screen resolution on most computers out there, not new mobile devices, because they have much higher resolution, like a lot of the new ones have 144 pixels per inch, but a standard monitor like I'm looking at right now is 72 pixels per inch. And so at that size, again, this dimensions have not changed, still 2048 by 3072, but the size of the image has changed because I've changed the resolution down, so the width is now 28.4 by 42.667. So let's go ahead and take it back to 300. And, you know, since it's not as fun to look at the top of his cute little head, and it's more fun to look at his cute little face, I'm going to move him up while we do this again. So let's go back to image size. So there is my little boy. So image size. Now if we resample this image, so if we're resizing, is not changing the quality, the dimensions are staying the same, and we just say make this 10 inches. Okay, so the resolution goes down to 204.8. And so if we resample this, which means essentially what's happening if I resample it, is Photoshop is going to guess about what image information I want to remove if I make it smaller. So let's make it a 5 by 7 to retain that same level of detail and everything. Similarly, if I were to make it bigger, so let's go back. So if I was to make it bigger than, say, the 2048 by 3072 or the 6.8 inches, let's say I was going to make it bigger. Maybe I wanted to keep the print quality. Use the term loosely. I'm doing air quotes. You can't see them right now, but there's air quotes. We're going to make the thing bigger. I'm going to make it, say, 10 inches. So essentially what's happening there is Photoshop is going to look at the pixels around the center pixel. I actually did an illustration of this so you can see this. So Photoshop is going to look at the center pixel, and it's going to look at all the pixels around it. It's called bicubic interpolation. And it's going to look at those pixels around, and it's going to guess what color this center pixel is going to be. So it's going to essentially go, which of these is closest to this? It's going to be like, oh, well, this one is, say this color. And it's going to go, oh, well, the one that's closest to this is this color. So the next image, or the next pixel over, is going to now be this red color, this darker red color, because it's definitely not black, right? So essentially, when you're making something bigger, it's going to look at the neighboring pixels, and it's going to decide what the middle pixel is going to be. It does it really fast. But essentially what's happening is it's throwing pixels in there. It's guessing about what pixels are going to go in there. And so that's why I said if you're changing the size dramatically, so you're changing from a much smaller sized image to a much bigger sized image, you're going to really see a lack of quality as you go up. As you go down, not so much, because your eyes can only detect so much. But as you go up, or especially if you go down and then back up, so let's try that. Okay, so let's go from, it was like basically 7 inches to begin with, right? So let's maybe make it 4 inches. Why is this not constraining? Let's make it 4 inches. So we'll go down to 4 inches by 6 inches. Cute little fella, right? But, okay, so let's look at the eyelashes, right? See how they're starting to kind of, now I'm zoomed in at 400%, right? So if we were looking at this at a normal resolution, it'd probably look fine. But let's just say for a second that we're going to now go back up, if you wanted to be really suicidal and dumb. Let's go back up to 10 inches. So we've gone back up, and Photoshop is now guessing about these images. So we're still at 100%, but see how poor the eyelashes look? See how we're starting to see this halo effect around these hard edges here on the hand? And see how the hair looks pretty grainy, pretty digital noisy? We're starting to see some pixelization right here in the skin that was not there before. So let's go back to where we were before. So this is the original image. We don't see the halo here. The hair looks soft, like it should. And the eyelashes look pretty crisp. So you don't want to do a big resize. So let's just pretend for a second. I'm going to copy this over. You guys probably remember this image from last week. This is the one that I did the clipping path on. So I'm going to paste this in here so you can see how big the image is in retrospect of today's current photography. So what I did last week that I said you should never do is I scaled an image up. And that's doing exactly the same thing as I was just talking about. So if you paste an image in here and you flatten it to the layer, it has not lost any quality. It's exactly the same quality it was when I brought it in. If I go down in size here, what it's going to do, Photoshop's going to guess about what image information you want to throw away. So it's going to grab pixels and literally discard them. And they won't be in there anymore. Similarly, if you go up in size, it's going to grab the nearest neighbor images, or the interpolation is going to select from the 8 pixels around. It's going to decide which of those is closest to the center pixel, and essentially go, oh, this red pixel is closest to that red pixel, so I'm going to throw that one in there for each pixel that it's creating out of thin air as you scale up. So that is what is to be avoided. So I guess the moral of the story is, if you're going to have any chance of using an image in a much bigger capacity than you might think, like for instance, when I buy images off of Getty, let's just go to Getty again, real briefly here. So I think we talked about family smiling. I think we looked at these folks like last week or whatever. So let's just look at these folks right here. So notice how you can buy it extra small. So extra small is 7 by 4 inches at 72 dpi. So it's basically going to be suitable only for the web and only in a relatively small capacity. That's not very big. So small size is 10 by 6.7 inches, again at 72 dpi. That's pretty small still. 727 by 484 at print quality. What is that? And we want a print quality of that. So that's 2.5 by 1.6 inches. That is terrible. Like, you could use that for a thumbnail. Their faces would be so small you won't be able to see them. So medium quality is 7 by 4 inches at 300 dpi. So this is actually a decent quality image. Myself, I always buy the large. And the reason why is, unless I don't think there's any chance that I'll ever use this on the cover of a magazine or on some sort of a 2-page spread where I'll be, you know, putting text on the left-hand side, or, you know, something like that, clipping out this family and putting them on the right-hand side, putting text on the left-hand side or something like that. Unless I know I'll never do that, it's just not worth it. I mean, you're only saving yourself like $100. So always better to buy the very biggest size you possibly can for that reason. Because otherwise you lose quality, and you can't put low quality stuff in print because it just looks too bad. It'll really pick up on it when you run it on the press. So hopefully that little lesson there teaches you a little something about image quality and what to and not to do. So you can scale this down if you want to scale it down. Of course, I already have scaled it up now, so probably should just toss the layer at this point. But let's see, paste it back in. So here's the original image, right? And if I want to make this smaller, I can, because I'm not really going to notice much of a difference going down when I use it at a smaller size. But you really should not go up. And if you do go up, it should be a very incremental amount, like, you know, that much or something. Now, there is a little tactic that can sometimes work, and it basically has to do with the way Photoshop scales, that bicubic upscaling. So if I had this image and I really had to use it at a print quality of this size, and I only had this size image, it's literally a quarter the size of what I need. So if that was the case, what I would do is I'd paste it in, I'd scale it up just a tiny bit. And by the way, I'm hitting Control-T to resize. A little bit. A little bit. And so on. And essentially what this does is it gives Photoshop a chance to not have to do so many pixels at the same time. It's not so much a speed thing, it's more about not resampling so many pixels simultaneously. It gives it a little bit more information. But I've done it enough times that I have noticed that it does seem to help. See, I've scaled it already up quite a bit, and this still looks pretty good. I mean, I have not lost that. I don't have the halo going on. The hair still looks soft, doesn't look all jaggy. And I've already gone up a fair amount, right? So let's keep going. Just a little bit more. Let's see what happens if I get it all the way to the max. Let's go a little bit more. So let's see what happens. And it's still retaining its quality. See, I'm not getting the halo. Hair still looks good. Not getting the digital noise. Let's go up a little bit more. So this tactic I have used many, many times over the years. And ideally not with faces, you know, with like background images. But it can be done if it has to be done. And that still looks pretty good. I mean, there's good detail in there. The hair still looks pretty good, doesn't look all jaggy. Look at that cute little ear. Anyway, that's my son for you. He's a cute little fella. So that's scaling. And then I did want to show you this. Illustrator is a vector program, and a vector program does not pay attention to this scaling issue. Okay, so let me open up this image that I did a long time ago in Illustrator. So this I did years and years and years ago, just to show you. So this, I'm gonna get rid of these last 3 layers. Badink. So this image right here was drawn in Illustrator. There's all the paths. So it's got a bunch of gradient mesh going on, a whole bunch of other gradients. You can see kind of all the different layers that I used. But the neat thing about Illustrator is, unlike Photoshop, you don't have pixels to worry about. All you have is these individual anchor points, which are basically mathematical computations. And so no matter whether you scale this thing down to the size that would be ideal for like a quarter, or whether you scale it up to cover a bus, it doesn't really care. I mean, it really does not care one iota about size. Now, you do notice as you get into this huge size, you do notice that some of the choices I made that made it look fine at a really small size, like these little funny paths, are a little off and look weird. So obviously, if I was going to put it on a bus, I'd have to do a little bit of work. But in any case, you can definitely tell that with a, you know, or for that matter, just a circle, right? Just a basic circle. So if we had a basic circle in Photoshop, so let's zoom in and look at this edge. I'm at 3,600, I'm at 6,800%. Look how nice and smooth that edge is, right? Let's go back out. Let's scale this huge. 173 inches. So it went from like 4 inches to 173 inches. Let's look at that up close. Zoom it in. See how nice and smooth that path is? It is about as smooth gets. So let's go ahead, zoom back out, and let's do the same trick in Photoshop. I'm gonna take this little path, little circle here. I'm gonna paste it in here. So here's the thing. If you're gonna paste a vector into Photoshop and you want to retain quality, you need to say, I want a smart object. That basically leaves it as a vector image. But for the purposes of this illustration, we're going to paste it in as pixels so you can understand the difference between pixels and vectors. Okay, so there's my image. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so you can see it. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. There it is. So there's my image. And you can already see the edge with the pixels. Doesn't look all that good. So let's see what happens when we Control-T it and we scale it up. Look at those lovely pixels. Oh, it just looks wonderful, right? Photoshop's done such a great job with that edge. Look at this. I mean, what the, right? It's all blurry and looks all nasty. So let's go back. Let's paste it as a smart object. Look at the difference. Go ahead and zoom in here. Oh, it's thinking about it. So it still looks like pixels because, again, Photoshop is a raster program, right? We've already established that. However, comma, as Jason would say. Jason's my mentor. So you zoom in, you see what I did? I just scaled that vector up. It still looks as good as it did when I had it tiny. It's still got those same little teeny spots. So it did not lose quality, not like before, where it was all blurry and horrible. So there you have it. scaling in Illustrator versus Photoshop, the difference between raster and vector scaling, and resampling, and why to avoid resampling at all costs. Scale first if you can at all. So if your image is 57 inches at 72 dpi and you just need something that's only 12 inches wide, well, you can just make it 300 and there you have it. It's almost 12 inches wide. Perfect. Didn't have to change a pixel at all. It's just wonderful. So thank you for watching. And this is Eric at Learn Design with Eric.